I am pretty sure that nobody wants to hear me saying that. All right. Hey, folks. We got several dozen folks who are definitely going to be joining live today. We had well over 100 people registered for this event. I just want to thank everybody who's coming in to join us today. This is our little miniature workshop on creating a resume for positions in the quote unquote commercial sciences in a very writ large kind of a way. We've been trying to find comfortable nomenclature to describe the difference between like an academic research-based CV and then resumes that would pertain to different sectors, and in the interests of keeping it nice and slim. I actually believe one of our guests here on today's call is the one who coined this one for us. That we're calling the commercial sciences folks who are working like in the private and public sectors and in the NGO space. And it's a little bit different from from some government focused kinds of things. Just to get it out of the way, I'll say that this is a high level overview. We're going to do our best to provide some good, useful guidance. Understand that there is no such thing as one perfect resume. There's no such thing as one absolutely perfect template that you will follow and will work 100% work all the time. But you can follow some best practices, and you can use some like wisdom you acquire over time and get feedback from people, and you'll be able to hopefully develop and design the kind of document that's going to help you get that foot in the door and really help you along the way as you try to build that career within the sciences. I'm John Miller. I am ESA's membership director. You can blame me for the sudden glut of extra programming that we threw together here in the springtime. We did this in response to seemingly a lot of folks finding themselves in the middle of a career pivot, perhaps. And it also happens to be graduation season. So there's a lot of people who are thinking about what their next steps are anyway. So we all thought this was going to be very useful stuff. Joined here on the team by Mary Jo Malumba. Mary Jo, what was your title again?
Hi, everyone. I'm the Education Program Assistant here at the Ecological Society of America.
Education Program Assistant. Thank you, Mary Jo. And then joined as well by my colleagues, Molly McDermott. Molly, join us real quick. Where are you from? What are you doing?
Sure. I live in Friday Harbor in Washington State. I'm an environmental consultant with Ramboll, background in ecology in both the government, federal government, and academia a bit, and now in environmental consulting.
Thank you, Molly. And Timothy Haas.
I'm Tim Haas. I worked at several engineering firms before I went into statistics, and I just retired from a business school as an associate professor, where I was there for 35 years. Well, I was 1 year at the University of Washington. So I've looked at a number of people trying to find a job.
Thank you both for joining. And we're joined as well by Aaron Stoller, who's you can say is the main instigator of a lot of our career orientation work these days within ESA. Aaron, tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi, thanks, John, for having me on. I'm Aaron Stoller. I'm with ExxonMobil Biomedical Sciences. I'm an applied ecologist working on biodiversity issues, but I have a history of career coaching as an assistant professor in the university systems and have been working with undergraduates and graduate students for 10 plus years.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for your contributions today. I figured, so because we have a pretty firm end bracket here on our time, I wanted to just sort of jump like right into presentation today. Mary Joy, can you see the first page of my slideshow? Pretty sure you can, but I just want to
Yes, I
make sure.
can.
Okay, fantastic, great. So what we're going to do, folks, is I'm going to do like a really quick high-level overview of some best practices around like professional resumes and the respective spaces which to use them, and sort of the difference between them and a CV. And then we're going to turn things over directly to our expert panelists here, the folks who do the hiring, the folks who can, share their own do's and don'ts and the advice that they've gained. And then after they've had a chance to talk a little bit about that, we'll just go into a Q&A. And when we're there, please use the Q&A feature rather than the chat to ask your questions, because we're trying to actually create a log of questions and responses so that we can build a whole bunch of extra content for career services for ecologists. So diving right in, we thought it'd be useful to talk a little bit about the difference between a resume and a CV. And we're actually going to be doing this with this session and the one we're doing next week on roles in like state and local government. Because we figure there's a lot of folks coming in from the sciences are experienced with a CV. You know what it is, you've used one in the past. But a resume for these kinds of jobs is a different animal altogether. I asked my colleague Sandra, who, if you've been on other sessions of ours, you may have interacted with her to some extent. But I said, just how would you describe the difference between like a CV and a resume? She said, well, you think about the translation, right? A CV is like literally like you're telling the whole story of your life, right? The vitae, your literal life. Whereas with like a resume, it's a shorter story. It's a summary of your experience. And that's really like the thing that when I talk about resumes with people, I always try to emphasize is this is a pretty short, concise document. Your personal experience, if you were to list out everything you've ever done in your career between your education, your skills attainment, your actual work experience, your successes, your awards, and everything else, it could be a very, very, very long document. But when you're using that to like actually apply for a job, what you have to do is slim that something down to be like a 1 or 2 page document. Very neat, very clean, very targeted. The idea is less to say everything that you've done and more to focus on the things that you've done that matter for the position that you're trying to get. We'll talk a little bit more about like what that actually means. You could just kind of like look at the table here. You see, the CV, you're trying to gather everything up there, and you've got your education, your research, your awards, your citations, your publications, your presentations, the positions that you've held. You might have, all the different academic honors that you gained front and center. That could be a really big part of this for you. But on a resume, you're skipping a lot of that, or you're trying to truncate it as much as you can, because if it's not immediately relevant to the position that you're aiming for, it just creates a lot of clutter. And rather than a CV being something that, for instance, like a hiring committee at a university might be looking at and really trying to get a sense of like who you are as a researcher, person in a private sector space, or like for me, when I'm hiring for positions like with ESA or other roles that I've had within like the association space, I think that's all well and good that you've done all those things. That's super cool, but I'm really concerned about what you can do for me right now. And that's the story that you really need to be telling within the scope of the resume. So you're really slimming this thing down to an objective or some kind of summary that explains, in a sentence or two, who you are and what it is that you do or what you're good at. List the relevant professional experience that you have. Collect those technical and professional skills that might not show immediately through those experiences, but that are things that you can do, that you happen to be expert or very proficient in. And then you probably also want to include, just mentioning almost in passing, the education that you have and how that might connect within the role. This is all just to show how you relate directly to whatever the position may be. And then obviously there's a best case, or best use case, I should say, for a CV. You're an academic role or research role, or if you're like doing certain kinds of exploration, like in international careers, like sometimes they'll ask for a CV using that specific terminology, looking for curriculum vitae. Oftentimes, in fact, like in the UK, I know when they say that, they really do mean a resume, but it's just what they're asking for. So be a little bit mindful of the nuance there. But like with your resume, public, private, NGO space, associations, nonprofits, and it's like sort of like a North American phenomenon in that regard. Really, really quickly, yes, like I'm doing great. I'm doing okay on time so far. This is rare for me, folks. I usually can spend 20 minutes talking on this part. But I wanted to just show you a couple of quick examples of like what a good resume happens to look like. And we have a live example. Molly has been so kind as to share a version of her resume that we're going to be able to take a look at together. And I will show it, but I also encourage Molly to do the same and refer to it. But what you see on the screen right now, this person named first last is an environmental scientist. They have some experience as an environmental scientist. They've been doing this work for a little while. And as you see here in this first little blurb, and this is their summary. This is their summary statement. This is where they say who they are and what they do. They are environmental scientists with 10 plus years of experience. And pay attention to some of these words here. Identifying environmental hazards, working with customers at all levels. Key achievements: led environmental assessments, 42 job sites, ensure compliance with federal regulations, reducing potential environmental dangers by 87%. This thing is absolutely loaded with what we call keywords. You're probably unfamiliar with the topic of keywords. These are things that are really, really important within a resume, because you want to use you want to use and prioritize, and like you almost want to like bold them in your brain. The words that the job description says that it wants. It's going to put those things like sometimes like in like a list of skills that they're looking for, or it's going to put them in like the must-haves. But pay attention to what those are, and then tailor statements like this, and tailor parts of your experience and other parts of your descriptions around that language. They say they want people who do environmental compliance. Tell them about how good you are at environmental compliance. Use examples. Use these data points that highlight successes that you've had and the way that you've made an impact. That's the kind of story you want to tell. And then note that this person, because they're a little bit experienced, they're diving straight into that experience. They're not going to say, "Oh, I did X, Y, or Z." That's like, I was in the Glee Club in college or something like that. No, they're going straight into it. This is their work as environmental scientist, their first position. According to this calendar, they're now going into their 8th year of working with a resume worded as an environmental scientist. Prior to that, they did 2 years an environmental specialist doing that. And then see how they're just doing just a few bullets. They're telling a very good and clear story about what it is that they did within those roles and the successes that they had. Now, this next example, this is a little bit more for it is for an entry-level person, but it's something that I think is an interesting example to include beyond like that really basic stuff, because I wanted to show you that first resume as a chance for you to see like, okay, like conceptually, what am I trying to accomplish? This one's for an entry-level environmental scientist, but you can follow some of these formatting procedures if you feel like you can do it cleanly and effectively. At the end of the day, a lot of what you're doing is trying to get through a first screen when you apply for a job. And especially like this is especially true for like earlier career kinds of roles where there are going to be a lot of applicants probably. The hiring manager probably isn't going to see this until it's been like every application has been through a vetting procedure. And nowadays that vetting procedure is often done by AI. So you need to be communicating very clearly with the computer and telling the computer exactly who you are, what you do, and why you're perfect for the job. So in that case, some like following a format like this is going to be okay, but it's also very eye-catching for when you get to that next step and the hiring manager is actually looking at it. Whatever you can do to get their attention and keep that attention for a second without dressing it up too much is going to be effective. This is clearly a person who wanted to stick to that one page, like the front of a page. So they use a little bit of formatting to list out like their contact information separately. They put their skills in a list. It's riding shotgun because they have a little bit of work experience and they want to focus on that. And they're also relying here down to see at the bottom of their volunteer activities and extracurriculars. That's actually a good way to show other experience that you have with the particular skills that the hiring entity is looking for. And if it's like leadership or organizing things or good administrative skills, a lot of folks do that kind of work in college with internships and volunteering activities. By all means, list it out. I'm more interested in the fact that you've done it than the context in which you did it. I'll put it that way as someone who does some hiring. Note that there's like a few other things that are like in here that are elements that you can consider as you're building out your resume. If you look under the contact, like, yeah, they say like where they are. They do indicate that they're open to remote positions. Have that, you need to have this like email and phone number, definitely the two things absolutely include. Nowadays, it's really important to have that online presence one way or another. So if you're on LinkedIn, include your LinkedIn handle, or I've seen people nowadays putting like a QR code or a short link in there to help whoever wants to look them up easily. Similarly, you're scientists, so you might have have a presence with GitHub. You might be on Orchid, Google Scholar, like anywhere where there's a chance for you to show off your scientific bona fides without having to list every single absolute thing within this one of these documents is a good thing. And I recommend that you do that, and I recommend that you make it known on your resume so that I, as a hiring manager, curious, can go look that up and see like, oh, cool. Not only has this person done all this interesting scientific work, but like, for instance, you're on LinkedIn and you post like a normal person about your career or about the field that you work in. I see that you care. I see that you're invested. And that's the kind of thing that's going to motivate me a little bit more to consider you seriously for the role I'm hiring for. Okay. I'm going to take like 2 more minutes and we're going to get like into the good stuff here. So just like from a very, 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 very high level. And if anybody has any concerns, we actually have a bunch of links we're going to send to you after this. Don't worry about like, wow, that was really fast. But with just some general best practices to keep in mind. I was hammering on keywords originally, but like seriously use your keywords. Look at the position descriptions. It's going to say, looking for people who know how to do this. So that's what you're going to tell them you know how to do, right? You can like include that in your experience, include that in your descriptions, include that in your summaries. Because you're doing that, you're going to wind up customizing your resume. Have like a template version, one that sort of like has like more or less like all the general stuff that you ordinarily would just be including if you were, making a new copy of the resume. But as well as that, make sure that you're tailoring it a little bit to each position that you're applying for. The reason you're doing that is so that you're always telling that story about yourself as being the right fit for that particular job. You're not going to make like a great, compelling case in your cover letter. Storytelling. You're not going to make a great, compelling case in your cover letter if you aren't really demonstrating that in the resume itself. What you want to do is you actually want to try to use your cover letter for that opportunity to expound on a couple of points. You're prioritizing, work with regulation and compliance. Here's a good example of how I did that very, very well with my last company. You're looking for someone who's excellent at a particular kind of modeling or a particular kind of field work. Here's an example. And this is how and where it made a difference. And again, like you always want to be using like those kinds of really clear examples that show impact. Measurable impact. You guys are scientists. You understand data. Use data, because that's the kind of thing that can help to make a difference. It tells a really compelling story. And then, like I was showing with that last example, there's the there's the whole issue around formatting in general with building out the document. There are a million different templates you can use online. Don't worry about not being a graphic designer. I included a URL here. This is Enhanced CV is just one of umpteen resume building websites out there. It is free. And I include the link here to like some scientist examples so you can find one that will work for you. I just caution you that any free product on the internet means that you are the product and that your data then becomes like something that they're going to want to use and sell and you're going to get marketed to at best. But you can still look at the examples and it can give you some ideas of what to work with. But at the end of the day, it's not the style, or it's not the style that matters, it's the substance. And that's really the most pertinent advice that I can give anyone. Is really focus on the quality of what you're putting in front of people. Do that tailoring, use those keywords, be short, be succinct, be precise, and be on target, because that's what's going to make the biggest difference for you. Now, just really quickly, Molly did give me permission to share her resume, and I'm gonna do that really quickly, but then I'm gonna let Molly talk about it. If Molly's okay with that. So give me 1 second.
Yeah, can do. And just to introduce it a bit, this is my resume from 3 years ago when I just finished a PhD and had formerly worked for the USGS as a federal scientist and also kind of done the academic thing for a little while, and was looking to pivot into environmental consulting specifically. So the reason I wanted to share this is because, this was a time period where I was trying to kind of transition from one area to another, trying to identify skills I had that might be relevant in this new scenario. And, I'm also motivated to share and be a part of this webinar because it was challenging then 3 years ago. A lot of job applications took a long time to find the right position. And I think it's even more challenging now for a lot of people in the environmental field. So that's why I decided to share this one. And some of the lessons learned here are to keep it extremely simple and easy to read. So like John was saying, really try to condense, keep it as simple as possible. I stripped everything down in my CV. It was, pages and pages, stripped it down to 1 page. I'd really say try to keep it to 1 page if you can. And then I used that little blurb at the top to highlight things that I normally would list out in a CV. For example, how many publications, how many presentations, how much grant funding, all that stuff you can just summarize in a sentence. If it's an important accomplishment, you can highlight it there. And then really, I think I probably could have moved the education part down a bit, but that's the section that was next, just highlighting degrees, what they were in, certifications I had. And then because I was trying to transition to environmental consulting and I knew that this technical skills were of particular importance, I really wanted to list those there and say exactly, they were looking for somebody who could do data analysis, who was familiar with statistics. So I needed to really list specifically what I'm able to do, what kind of programs and other kind of capacities I had. So highlighting that I think is a big difference too from a CV, is listing those technical skills. And then again, there's not space to list everything. So you can just say, hey, this is relevant. This isn't all my experience, but this is the relevant things that I'm highlighting. And I chose very carefully how to describe them. So for example, the first bullet point mentions English and Spanish because they were looking for somebody who also spoke Spanish to review reports. So even though this wasn't exactly related to the position, there was a reason that I chose that position and that way of describing it. Everything that I described in here was trying to connect to something that they were looking for in the position. Writing skills, so I tried to describe the writing skills I had, producing reports. This position that I have now that I was applying for was looking for someone with experience working on biodiversity and also experience in bird biology. So I was highlighting those aspects of my background, my ability to work with others. So I think there's a temptation maybe to, when you're thinking about your relevant experience, for example, applying for a biology position, to only include positions that are relevant to biology, but I think it's okay to include other positions. So for example, I've been on the hiring panel for 3 different positions. Now, each time we had 80 to 90 applicants. And a lot of times they're early career. And I think particularly if you're early career, it's okay to list a position that isn't necessarily directly the same type of subject matter, but think about why you're including it. So for example, somebody who submitted a resume for a position we were hiring for mentioned that they had been a manager of a call center for student services for the entire 4 years of their college degree. And they highlighted that because it showed time management organization skills, which is something that we looked for. So that's just an example of it's okay to include things that maybe don't have quite the same subject matter, but you can think broadly about relevant experience and make sure you just understand why it is relevant and highlight it for the person. Hey, I worked all through college. That obviously shows that I have time management and organization. And here's what I did. I worked for a long time. I was in a trusted position. So those kinds of things can be good to highlight. Just think about why you're including them. And yeah, blah, blah, blah. This is the rest. Selected publications. I kind of went back and forth about whether to include this when I was submitting, but I'm glad I did. Part of the reason I did include publications was because they were looking for someone with experience in systematic reviews. And I wanted to highlight that, hey, I'd done that. And that wasn't something I was able to specifically list under a different position. So all that to say, just think about what you're including and why. Try to get it all down to one page. I promise that you can.
Thank you very much for that, Molly. I do want to actually mention one thing that you sort of brought up when you were talking about the call center example, and that's in this sector, and especially in smaller companies. Like I don't know if this would necessarily pertain if you're applying, for instance, at Ramboll or ExxonMobil Biomedical, but if you're applying at the Ecological Society of America, you're it's very much a skills kind of a thing, and but you might not have ever worked for a scientific society before. Hence, we like transferable skills an awful lot. And we'll talk more about what that means, but that's something to keep in mind as well. These are the kinds of things that they're actual tangible, real skills, or sometimes they're intangible, like leadership is one, organization stuff can be one as well, but it's relevant like across the profession. It's just something that you should be good at. And if you can demonstrate that, then that's going to be a big winner for you. Okay. Molly, did you have any other things in particular that you wanted to share while we have them right now?
Yeah, just about that note on transferable skills, I just wanted to mention something that really helped me identify what those were, particularly because I was applying for a job in a field that I'd never worked in. So I didn't really understand what the day-to-day was of an environmental consultant at that point when I was applying. So what I did is I reached out on LinkedIn and just anyone I knew and tried to see if somebody would talk to me for an informational interview. So talk to somebody in the field that you're working in, not necessarily because you're looking for a job, but just to try to better understand your day-to-day. And if you're lucky enough to get, and a lot of people are generous with their time, happy to talk to you. I was lucky enough to get connected with somebody who was willing to talk to me at a totally different company from where I was applying to. And I basically just said, tell me more about what your day-to-day is, help me understand like how my academic experience might translate. And they really did help me understand like, oh, okay, yeah, I've applied for grants. That's similar to the RFP applications that you do as an environmental consultant. I have managed field crews. That's similar to project management skills. So being able to understand what was transferable about my experience. So I definitely recommend that to anybody, is try to talk to somebody in the field that you're trying to pivot or break into.
Very good. Thank you, Molly. Tim Haas. So you've had pretty varied experience. You talk like a little bit about that and what you've observed from the core things to include when people were applying for the kinds of roles that you've seen and that you supervise.
Okay, so thanks, Jonathan, for the introduction. I earned a degree in mechanical engineering, bachelor's, and I was an engineer at various electronics and electromechanical devices outfits in the LA area in the late 70s and 80s. And I bounced around companies that would fall apart under me, and I'd go get another job. And it was kind of the Wild West time for computing. Sometimes a phone call would get you a job, but I was living inside my main path of I'm an engineer, so I'm applying for engineering jobs. And when I left my first job right out of college, I found this book, What Color is Your Parachute? And I read it. And they said, you're wasting your time with HR. That was their first point. And it was just alarming to me because I thought the way you got a job was you applied to HR and everything went really by the book. And they said, no, you got to network. You have to network. And Molly brought that up very tellingly in her direct experience. Her networking really helped her. I had a graduate student who came from Lithuania, and she wanted to work in quality management, which is a big deal in business. But she was pursuing a master's in management at the School of Business at Milwaukee. So she was my graduate student for a quality control course. And she got interested in the material, and she did what Molly did. Is she got on. This was, I think, this was before LinkedIn occurred. But she found some people who were doing quality management in big businesses, and she talked to them. And somebody referred her to General Electric Corporation. And because of her East European skills in languages, she knew about 5 languages. She was made the head of quality control for all of East Europe for General Electric. And she had no job experience. So and she was a very facile person and very good at forming a relationship quickly, professionally, by talking. And that was just amazing to me. I had done some of that when I was an engineer. The What Color Is Your Parachute book said one thing: you have to figure out how to get to the person who has the power to hire you. And they said, that's not HR. HR is one of the lowest organizations in any corporate hierarchy. You need to get to the managers who are looking for someone, and you need to somehow talk to them, or at least get your resume in front of them. And your point, Jonathan, about now they use AI to screen resumes, that's just death. There's got to be a way to get around that, because you are now a prisoner of this mimic system, this AI system, which is just looking for words. But a manager who needs a skill set that you happen to have, you've got to get that person to see through the fact that you might be using not exactly the words that the AI system wants to see. But the manager who's experienced is going to quickly decide whether you have the skills they need or not. But getting to that person is a real art. So and LinkedIn, I think, has been a big boon to people who are trying to get past the layers of HR that usually now 90% of the time you don't even get a response when you apply to a position. You don't get anything. And I've heard many people say, what happened to the old days when you at least got a courtesy letter? You don't even get that. So, okay, I'm going to focus a little bit for a few minutes on what is called a career change resume. As Molly mentioned, and you mentioned, identifying skills is really important if you're going to apply to a job that is outside ecology. So if you decide to go down the path of, hey, here's a position I think I have qualifications for, how would I go about tailoring my resume for that position? Now, this could take a lot of time. If you've identified 10 or 20 positions that you think you might be competitive at, you really ought to tailor your resume for each and every one of those positions. There's a serious time commitment here. But if you don't, you're probably wasting your time in applying. So, okay, what you need to do is you need to look at your educational background and pull out of it things that are specific skills. Now, I'm technically oriented, so I'll just suggest that if you've learned something about GIS, if you learned something about Python, statistical analysis, you want to use those words, because a manager is going to be looking for skills that they can put you to a task the day you walk into your first job. So again, Molly was saying this one-page thing, that's super important. How are you going to take all the verbiage out so that all your skill phrases are all that's left, and have that as one page, maybe a page and a half? But when I was on hiring committees in the School of Business, most of us got tired after the end of the first page, and we just didn't turn the page, because we would have 200 people applying for a job, and there were 6 of us. We had papers to write, we had classes to teach, and now we have a pile of 200 CVs. I don't think so. That's not going to happen. And now we're seeing, with the turbulence in the job market, as Molly mentioned, you're seeing 90, 100 people apply to a job. You yourself are seeing that. So you've got to be able to get their attention with skills that they need for their problem, which is the only reason they're even looking for someone. You need to get that to their eyes very quickly. So I've put in a couple of links to people who talk about how to write a career change resume in the materials after the webinar. And I can simply say for sure that if you do want to start looking outside of ecology, you need to recognize that you have one strike against you and be clear about that. And that is, you are competing with people who have the education and the certificates that are aligned with the job that is being posted, and you don't. One of the things you could do to fix that is to look into some online certificates to prop up skills that you might find are reoccurring in open position advertisements. If you're young, you have the time to do that. And if you want to start moving in a different direction, you're going to have to think seriously about some kind of retraining. It's bitter medicine because you may be in debt for the degree you already have. But if you're wanting to start a career change, take it from me. I left engineering and went and started working into statistics and then eventually academia. It took me 10 years to make the transition. Many courses that I got no credit for when I got into my PhD program in statistics. And many times I was turned down flat. But a career change can be made, but it is not a simple matter. And I think, so a few specific skills that I've just jotted down here, like I said, GIS experience, Python experience, statistical analysis, setting up camera traps, laboratory work on water quality. Have you actually been in the laboratory? Do you know how to use the instruments? And nowadays, perhaps you've built a ChatGPT application system. Lots of employers might be very interested if you've had any experience in developing an AI-based system. There's not a lot of people who've actually done that. And that is something that the corporate world is extremely interested in because they can use that, they are thinking, as a way to reduce the number of people they need to hire. That's my my nutshell overview.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. The piece you're just talking about is a perfect segue for me because I wanted to just share a few things with folks before we dive into Q&A. And by the way, folks, if you're going, if you have questions, now's the time to enter them into the Q&A because I'm going to creatively fill some time for a couple of minutes and then we'll come back. And this is your chance to ask questions of Molly, of Tim, of Aaron, of me, anything that's on your mind. There was one person who did ask in the Q&A earlier about what resume worded meant. It was just the name of the company. Don't worry about that. You'll see that on some of the examples, or you'll see enhanced CV on some of the examples and things like that. It's literally just the company name and their filling space with it. But so you're all aware, this is just part of a pretty substantial series that we've been running. The Aaron Stoller portion of this, it's really hosted by our private and public sector ecologists section, started back in the fall. We will hold 10 total sessions of this in this cycle, basically, finally ending up in June. Been going every month the entire time. And Aaron, thank you so much for contributing those. We do have another resume session scheduled for next week. That's for roles in state and local governments. We have all of this stuff backed up on our YouTube channel, and you can access it through the webinars page on our website, and you can also register through there. We have a couple specific skills-based events coming up, and these are some opportunities for you to want to work on some of these skills. But if you stick with ESA, understand that what we started to do with a lot of this like professional development for ecologists a couple of years ago now, a year and a half ago, was basically putting out feelers and creating a pilot program to see what folks would respond to, what would be worthwhile for them, and what we'd be able to sustain with some longevity. We're hopeful to start actually issuing certificates of completion, if nothing else, potentially with some stackable, we can come back to that word in a little bit, some stackable kind of credentialing opportunities in and around specific competency-based things in like scientific work. It's not ecology per se, it's applied or applications of different skills within ecology. So if you see this series or quantitative method series, our Black Ecologist section organized this, and we were really happy to host it with them. Last week was going to be the meta-analysis in ecology session, but that actually had to be postponed for a very good reason. We're just looking for the new date for it. Then we have some upcoming ones on spatial statistics, individual-based modeling, and machine learning methods. We just wrapped up a course on AI and large language models for building models and doing code generation in ecology. So we may be able to bring back something like that in the future as well. This afternoon, we're doing a session with the folks at eDNA Tech on how eDNA works, transforming biodiversity monitoring. That's going to be pretty exciting, and we're looking for more opportunities to build out like a lot of these monitoring-based, remote sensing-based, different kinds of instruments, different kinds of analysis of the environmental data, and eDNA happens to be a big one. So pay attention to like messages from us going into the future, because we'll keep offering stuff like this. And then we do try to prioritize science communication, because doing good science is extremely important, but there has to be a so what at the end of that sentence. And that's what the communicating science and decision makers workshop happens to be part of. We want scientists to feel like they can adequately communicate the results of their work and the importance and the implications of their work in front of the people who need to make decisions. So those are just some of just part of the package, basically. We'll keep adding more. If you're interested in getting a additional credential that goes beyond just having the degree, we do offer a certification in ecology. It is based on work you've already done and education you've already attained. That's to get your foot in the door. And then we have a continuing education model that supports that program. This goes in much greater depth on the website, so I encourage you to check that out. We'll probably have another information session around that relatively soon. There is a recording of one on our YouTube channel right now. And then this is just a brief call. If you are considering sharing science, ESA 2025 is coming to Baltimore. If you're in, the sort of the DMV, Mid-Atlantic, broader, East Coast of the United States, late breaking call is going out this week. The deadline has been moved to May 15th. In addition, though, to late breaking posters, we're putting out a couple of very specific calls. My office, and working with Sandra, typically we do the Career Central part of the program. That is all the stuff that's not, this is not a modeling workshop, and it is not, learning, like the really high, heavy scientific stuff. It is about navigating careers as a scientist. It is about exploring careers as a scientist. It is about working on your resume and getting live feedback on that. It is about doing mock interviews. And this year, we're adding a hiring component to Career Central. So on the very first day of the meeting, the Monday, I should say, Monday's version of Career Central is going to be focused on bringing employers and doing a lot of this really practical stuff together. So folks who are looking for work, looking for new opportunities can do that. And fingers crossed, we'll be able to convince the meetings team to give us a really good one-day exhibit hall only rate. Then the final day, the Thursday, which is the day of late breaking posters, we're putting out a specific call for if anyone out here is an educator or has done work in like pedagogy models or what's the other one? The one that's for adult education. I forgot the word. In and around ecology, environmental stuff, evolutionary biology, things that relate. Please consider submitting specifically for that call, because we're trying to build like an ecology education showcase then there on the Thursday as well. So really interesting stuff. There we go. I had a slide for that. To support people who want to participate, We do have a limited number of registration grants left, and we'll be issuing the call for those applications along with the late breaking call. And then in addition to what we have available for or from like big ESA, many of our sections and chapters are sponsoring different kinds of awards. Some of it's, specific to like student travel, some of it's presentation based, but those are opportunities you can consider for funding as well. So if you're worried about how am I going to get there, how am I going to pay for it, and that kind of thing, there might be an option. And that's something to keep in mind. Okay, let's go into some Q&A. So we've had a number of things answered during the chat, but I'm going to go straight to Jesse. Speaking of training and speaking of certificates and things like that, do you have any advice, panelists? Don't ask John because John just spent a lot of money on his certificate. Do you have any advice for budgeting? Tons of cool opportunities, but I don't want to overspend on things that won't necessarily land jobs. What do we think, team?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And that's where some of those informational interviews might be really helpful to you. I guess my advice would be to stay focused on a particular area that you're looking to move into, talk to people in that area, ask them what kind of professional certifications they're looking for, and pick one or two. I guess I can't be more specific than that without knowing what area you're going into, but for an example, in environmental consulting, we see tons of people with ecology degrees and not that many with wetland delineation certificates, for example. So that's like a technical skill set that could certainly help give you a leg up in getting a job.
Yeah, and I'll say, Jesse, for other folks who've been down this path, one thing I can say, because we try to build partner relationships with a lot of the like non-university, like private training entities out there that do different kinds of scientific training. For a few $100s, you can get like, their certificate in X. And I don't want to be playing favorites right now. I'm not going to like name anything out straight up. But like, for instance, I know there are delineations, there are quantitative methods, there are, I've seen using scent dogs, like in the field, like these are UAVs. There are lots of opportunities to do this. And then if you want something that's perhaps like has a little bit more cachet, like on the resume itself, or you're concerned about the how much time like per day or per week you would need to put into a particular training course or something. You can also look at some of the university professional programs or extension programs will have stuff like this. There's differences in pricing, obviously, between different institutions, but like a little bit of homework should turn over a few opportunities that probably hit in the sweet spot with your budget and what your priorities happen to be. And I think that's about as clean as I can put that.
I also want to add that writing skills are suffering for many people across the board. So and are highly transferable to many, many, many different areas within and outside of ecology. So if you take a writing workshop, I think that would benefit many job applicants. I don't know what you all think about that, but I think writing is a skill that's, makes someone stand out.
Yeah. Yeah, I personally have a comms background. Listen, folks, I'm like the king of the transferable skills because like I work for a scientific society. I have a degree in history and a degree in writing. And then I got a bunch of certificates in like web development. Why am I here? Because of transferable skills. It had nothing, like that stuff pertains, like the fact that I can write well is a difference maker for me. The fact that I understand like good effective communication and like sorry folks, we're always trying to manipulate you with emotional hooks when we do marketing. It's just how it goes. No offense, but like that's like the kind of thing that they got me into positions where I can do this stuff. And I built up a whole bunch of like organizational competencies by doing volunteer work and, kind of sticking my nose where it didn't belong in other professional spaces because I wanted to learn how different things worked. And over time, you develop, sort of like it's like your own personal competency profile. And that's think that really pertains. But I'm saying that because the communication piece is really, really big. I think it's, for me at least, it's one of my number one transferable skills, because you can use it anywhere. In fact, if you're a good writer and you're a scientist, sky's kind of the limit, because you can be like in development, you can be doing the grant work, you can be, writing the reports, you can be working as a science communicator, like a professional one. You can be at teaching, there's a whole lot you can do if you know how to do effective communication. So good to know, Molly. Tim, you look like you're like had something on the tip of your tongue.
Sure. Just a brief follow-up on that. If you look at the job postings and the descriptions, and you see skills that are occurring over and over again that you're interested in pursuing, but you don't have, the positions that you're interested in, that's a good way to identify certificates that are worth pursuing. Web development, that's very popular. Machine learning. So let's say in your ecology background, you were attracted to technical statistical ideas. That would be something that you could get certificates in that could leverage off of what you already know. Um, you need to kind of get a sense of what jobs are out there, and then ask yourself what sort of core interests do you have, and come up with a plan for what additional education, if any, you need to pursue. So a lot of this is, as in the parachute book, talked about a lot. That what I think the Chinese have a phrase, opportunity in crisis. That this is a time to do some thinking about what are your interests and where would you like to see your life going, and try to find open positions for which there's more than one that you could build yourself into being an ideal candidate for. That's it.
Thank you, Tim. I have a question for the folks. So we're talking about like some skills attainment stuff, and trying to create more opportunity for yourself with that. Assuming you need a job today, for a person who might be like trying to come in to your company, or come in to do the thing that you personally do professionally now, what do you think are your what do you think are the things that they should most be trying to highlight about themselves in their resume and in their application process? Aaron, you can include yourself as well, because let's see how for you.
I was going to say something about the previous discussion, but it's fine.
I can speak to that. Yeah, I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I think the top transferable skills that would serve you well at our company, or really any kind of industry science position, would be data analysis, statistical skills. That's something that a lot of ecologists do have training in already, and is a pretty great technical skill to leverage in a lot of different applications. I mean, data are data. And even within my environmental consulting role, I often work on projects that have nothing to do with ecology just because I can do statistical data analysis. So people will pull me in for, stuff to do with groundwater and ship movements and whatever, just because I have the data skills. Another thing is the writing, like I mentioned. That's a skill that's just, frankly, it's getting worse and worse in college graduates. So if you can beef up those skills, that helps you stand out. Or if you have those skills already and you can prove it, like that's definitely something that will stand out. And then in consulting in particular, it's also a people skills role. So being able to demonstrate that you can work well with others, that you can manage others, that you can be part of a team, that you can collaborate, communicate. Any way you can demonstrate that. That one's a bit hard to pursue like a certification for. That's really more through job experience. But there are opportunities to work on it, such as going to conferences and presenting and working as part of a team, especially if you're coming from more of an academic background. So much of the work is done where you're the sole person working by yourself and you have to do every step of the process yourself. And that's just not how a lot of things work in the kind of more industry setting. So seeking out opportunities to work as part of a team and highlighting those can be really helpful.
Yeah, I'll add that employers, so the best advice I can give to anybody who's writing a resume and applying is to stop writing and put yourself in the chair of the employer and imagine what it is that they want. If you can genuinely do that, you are going to recognize two things. One, your application will be stronger. Two, you have no idea what you want. Employers generally do not know what it is that they want or need. They have a thought, they have a wish list, and that's what the job application is. It is a wish list, nothing more than that. They want somebody with all of these skills and these expertises, but they actually just wish that they had it. They're never going to find anyone with all of the job skills that they've posted. Your job is to take all of your transferable skills and cram them into a format that tells them what they need, right? That's the ticket. If you put yourself in that chair of the employer and you figure out, yeah, I think we could actually use this. I didn't think about that before, but yeah, I didn't think that we needed somebody with AI experience. And yeah, we actually did mean to put in there, we need somebody who's good at collaboration and good at talking to people. We didn't put that in there, but that would be really helpful, right? You have to put yourself into that chair, write that resume as if you were writing to yourself as the employer looking for the best employee.
Well said, Aaron. So we're like got a few minutes. Kate in the Q&A has asked a phenomenal question with the Zoom follow-up. So, any advice for older applicants? Do you think that age discrimination is real? How can you get around it? Or do you think it's less of an issue in the sciences because of the unique qualifications of doing science? And now I have what my answer is, but I do want to hear from like our actual experts on the panel about this.
I think age discrimination is very real. It's not a nice thing to say, but it is extremely real. Through the years in academia, I found that there was this unspoken sense that if you hired young people, you could pay them dirt and get them to work really hard. And by the way, they had the most recent education, so they would be most likely to be up on the cutting edge. So there were basically roughly three reasons for the discrimination. It wasn't a personal thing. It was just simply, why would we want to spend time and money on someone who's old, using the very derogatory version of the word. Of course, we never said any of this, but it was very clear in all the committee meetings I was in that if someone came in their 40s, they just were not going to get past the second meeting. So how do you get around that? Well, you look for jobs that are very specific and narrow, in my opinion, that they want you to write code, say, and you've gotten into your resume that you know exactly the language they want to see. You might be able to get a remote position. If you can get that, you might be able to move that into a position that's physically in the presence in a building. So to me, the way to get around this discrimination is try to get a job that needs a specific skill and is not very high level. The other problem that you have as an older person is that if you have been successful in the job market and you have a salary history which is significant, that is going to work against you, because they're going to say, we would have to pay this person so much, and we can find this younger person and we can pay them less. And we can't really pay the older person this amount of money that they're used to because we have this younger person. So the challenge of getting around that salary history thing is Boy, that's an open one. And I have seen that come up, and it's somehow you need to make that not important. If you say I will work for anything, then they think you're a loser, and they will not hire you because you're willing to work for peanuts. And look, you were making so much money before. You must be desperate. So I don't have a good answer for the salary thing. If you could somehow keep that from coming up in the discussion until much later, that might be the best way forward. But I've known a number of people now who are older who have been looking and looking and looking. It's not a nice thing to say, but it is the reality.
I'll give just a quick good answer to what I think is the salary problem, and I know we're out of time. If you are entering in, because I've dealt with this before personally, if you are entering into a field where you are not going to be valued because you don't have that much experience, but you still want the money, convince them that you are trying to change careers to improve your overall skill portfolio, embed that into your resume, and it will convince them that you are ready to take a pay cut because you acknowledge that you don't have the necessary skills, but at the same time, you also expect to be compensated for the skills that you do have, and rise up through the ranks in this new position and this new field that you're in.
Yeah, we host some events. We've done them live at the annual meeting primarily, but we hosted 4 folks who are trying to make the career transitions, and that happens to be a big one. And it's people who were like, they started off in academia, they want to go into education, or they want to go to private, or vice versa, or they wanted to make that pivot into government. And there's a question that comes up. Like, I've been in and around workforce development for basically 20 years, and like, age discrimination it's a real thing. A lot of other, it's also a form of discrimination, and it's a real thing that impacts hiring. But sort of like, what Aaron and Tim are saying, like, there's ways that you can almost make it a strength for you. Your experience is a strength, your ability, your willingness to try new things is a strength. There's a lot that you can do. So we're like technically at time, just for the sake of posterity, because we're doing a live recording here. Molly, Tim, any final words before we wrap it up?
It's a challenging job market right now. I think that's worth acknowledging, and it can be worth being open-minded and creative in your job search, and then also just networking, reaching out to people who are willing to help, even if they don't have a job for you at that time. It can always be worthwhile to make a connection.
Well, folks, thank you much, panelists. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Just real quick. For those with some statistical interest, there's lots of opportunity in marketing and market research. And if you have a job and you want to get back into ecology and things get better in 5-6 years, with that job, you have time and income, and you can start your networking and get back into ecology. So we are in times, we have to be very clear. These are unprecedented times. One path for a young person is to get a job of some kind, get an income, and then start the serious business of getting back into ecology.
Well said. And I'll also say, like, transitions happen, pathways can be weird, and you never quite know where you're going to land. But the thing that you sometimes least expect, like going from a career in comms into directly doing member services for a scientific society, might be exactly the thing that turns out to be in your wheelhouse. So, be open, be willing to try some things, and don't be afraid. Even if nothing else, you have a whole community of people around you who can, provide support and try to give you guidance, if nothing else, or a little bit of a pat in the back when you need one. So just really quick to wrap it up, we have a number of resources that you can use in addition to those other things that I mentioned. You can just go to esacareercenter.org. That is like our actual job board paid for, managed by Wiley. This is their publisher, but they offer this as a service. The Ecolog L listserv also includes just umpteen different opportunities, everything from like internships and postdoc research positions up through, being the executive director at, a research station or, a natural history museum or something like that. It's like really, there's just ever so much stuff on Ecolog. And then our Eco platform on Discourse has a little bit of space for everybody around different kinds of interests that you can go in and you can explore and you can see what other people are talking about in terms of ecology careers. And then I'll make sure that you get this slide in the final thing, but look us up on LinkedIn, make friends, communicate, ask questions. It's okay. This is why people get onto these platforms so that they can talk to each other. And that's sort of what the end goal is. So I love that Sandra has this. Go look at our webinar archive. We have done a lot of different sessions around different kinds of career pathways and different things you can do. And then you can sign up for future things that we have, including the ones that I showed earlier. Folks, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope you found this useful. I hope that you got something out of it. And stay tuned because we'll be sending out in this, like the recap, a link to the recording, plus a whole bunch of other resources, things that we've referenced, and some additional stuff. So thank you so much. Thank you for being around ESA. We look forward to seeing more of you and hope that we can continue to help build good career pathways for ecologists.
Thanks for
Have a
organizing,
lovely rest.
John.
Yeah, thanks, folks.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.